Yeah, they're gonna re-add solos for sure. I don't know, man. SDF seemed really committed this time. Don't be an idiot. They're losing the entire player base. Maybe you're right, but there's no way they're putting it back in without screwing it up. There's literally no way to fuck it up. I don't know, man. They've got quite the track record. I'm confident. You have no reason to be confident. Shut the hell up. I'm so confident they can't fuck it up that I will eat my own nutsack if they do. Okay, but for real, they aren't gonna leave solos as this teeming hellscape for long. But I still wanted to get this video out with ways I would look to improve the ability to 1v3 in this game. So we're gonna keep it short and we're gonna keep it sweet. I'll explain the kind of change and give a few examples of what it would look like, then move on. We're gonna break these suggestions down into a few sections. HTK and TTK, improving skill expression and reducing incoming damage, increasing trio skill cap, specific buffs for solos, and reducing the free power trios get. HTK and TTK was a big talking point for the previous video, so I wanted to get it out of the way first. I think that in order for outnumbered fights to be reasonably winnable in this game, we cannot have high TTK or HTK. There just aren't the tools to continually put pressure on one opponent until they fall without basically throwing away your life. So unless a trade results in a kill, your opponents can cycle the damaged character to the back while the others fight while never giving you a chance to heal. With quick deaths, you can more consistently be rewarded for catching an opponent off guard. I think high TTK and HTK feels better for the game overall and works better when fights are fair, but in order for outnumbered fights to be more reasonably winnable, I think a low TTK is required. Next up, let's look at ways to reduce incoming damage and increase the game's skill cap. Starting with what I don't want to see, which is a generic dodge and stamina system. While they would increase the skill cap and are seen in games like this, and they add more tools for outplaying your opponents, I think they would be too much of a change to the game's foundation and aren't appropriate suggestions for this video where I want to try and better work within the game's current framework. Now on to what I and everyone else wants to see, blocking. At one point SDF said he was considering a dedicated block key, and I think this would be phenomenal. Blocking is already in the game, it just isn't available to everyone all the time, and it should be. It gives everyone a defensive option besides ducking, dodging, and running, allowing you to outplay your opponents. Whether it's in a 1v1, 3v3, or 1v3, any generic tools that give more options are good. On top of this, the dedicated key would allow casters to keep all their spells, and allow weapons to have their right clicks be a different attack pattern, increasing the options in melee combat even more. In that vein, I would like to see things like Dagger Mastery or Rapier Mastery turn Dagger and Rapier blocks into a parry. As for iframes as a way to reduce incoming damage to 0, I already mentioned I don't want to see a role in this game, but I think there is one place where iframes are appropriate, and that's on Rogue's Tumble. Not necessarily full body or the entire animation, but maybe just the legs or at the start of the animation. Up next, we want to explore ways to put some of the skill burden onto the trios, so the solo doesn't have to be playing out of their mind every time to beat any trio. Specifically, we want to put some weight on the positioning that a trio has to look at. I think Chain Lightning is a great example of the kind of effect we want. Something that punishes a team for creating a man sandwich and encourages them to take a more metered approach to running you down. So, buffing things like Sorcerer's Lightning Mastery to be more of a threat. It doesn't hurt solos versus solos or trios versus solos, but it gives solos another tool to fight larger groups. We can also look at adding solo-specific buffs that encourage this without harming solo versus solo gameplay. For example, I think Rogue Poison is a great candidate for a few options. One option is that when a poison target dies, they release poison clouds for each stack they've had. Or another is that while poisoned, an enemy has an AoE around them, like Electrosphere, that spreads poison stacks to enemies. These encourage the opposing team to think more about their positioning, where previously they could all just run you down at once. Now, if you land a few knives, stack a bit of poison, they'll want to spread out, allowing the rogue to take more favorable 1v1 trades using their higher agility. Changes like that add a more interesting dynamic for the trio to play around, while not just strictly buffing a skill like poison to do more damage if you're solo. Transitioning from that, let's talk about some buffs specifically for solos. In my opinion, what separates a good candidate from a bad one are whether or not they affect solo versus solo gameplay. For example, some ideas I've seen thrown around a lot that I don't think are very good are just free stat buffs, extra perks, or extra skill slots for solos. Because while yes, they would make them stronger versus trios, it also makes them stronger versus each other. And that's not something we want. This also means that if we look to buff perks or skills when someone is solo, like the poison change, we need to make sure that it has the caveat of only working against members of a team. For example, if we allow Druid's Spirit Bond to send damage to their Trent when solo, we want to make sure that it only works when that damage comes from an enemy that is a member of a party. Some other skills have room to be naturally buffed without that weird edge case caveat though, similar to poison, such as Fighter's Taunt having a primary target. And on top of increasing resistances, it reduces damage further from anybody that isn't the primary target of the skill. Some perks also lend themselves naturally to small changes that make them better versus a team. For example, Ice Shield and Dark Reflection, if you change them to no longer apply a self debuff that is a cooldown for when it can happen again, and instead apply an effect to the opponent that determines when they're able to activate the effect again, now those passives have a better effect versus an entire team. If somehow your wizard survives 3 hits, that's 3 Ice Shield procs they got on the other team, allowing them to maybe maneuver a little bit better against this team that is just pounding them. Though, back to the topic of universal buffs, there is one that I would like to see for solos, which is a universal morale boost. Because healing after you get a kill has no effect on solo versus solo gameplay, since your opponent's kind of dead and doesn't care if you healed, but it would be a huge boon for winning outnumbered fights, especially for melee classes like Barbarian and Fighter that are in there trading. The issue is that some classes need more than just HP, like a wizard, and I think that if a system like this were to be tested, then classes should get something besides just health. For example, Wizard would get a slight bit of spell regen while standing, like the original Chorale of Clarity Bard had. Now, the last thing I want to touch on is reducing some of the free powers Trio gets, or forcing a perk tax on them to reach full effectiveness. An example of the first change would be for Rogue's Jokester perk. Currently, a team gets +6 all out of it, but a solo gets +2. But if the perk were changed to give +1 all in a group, or +2 all solo, the perk still has about the same total effect for solos or teams. An example of a perk tax, while I don't think this is a good idea, it's just an example, would be to reduce the effectiveness of cleric heals on other players, but require them to have a perk that brings those heals back up to full strength. It doesn't have to be an entirely new perk, it could just be one of the perks that already exist, but basically if they want to be a healer for their entire team, make them take it. And with that, we're done. Sorry, it's a lot more rushed and unscientific than the last one, but on fucking God, I doubt the game will remain in this state for even a week after this video is out. Anyways, take it easy.